I talk about purpose more as the quality of being rather than as a thing that we do or a goal or an objective. Who are we called to be, right? And to make the practice be living into that more fully. And then as we be who we are here to be, the doing arises from there.
Yeah. I'm Debbie Harrell, life coach for rebellious women, aspiring rebellious women, and also your host. This show is really for anyone who is tired of the status quo and ready to start asking the questions that we've all been conditioned to avoid. We're here to examine the systems, the cycles, and the norms that are keeping us all stuck. We're also here to imagine and work towards something better. So if you're a disruptor, a cycle breaker, or someone who just suspects there's got to be a better way, you're in the right place. Now for today's show. I'm joined by Dr. Liza Rankow, activist, spiritual leader, educator, and author of the book Soul Medicine for a Fractured World, Healing, Justice, and the Path of Wholeness. Dr. Liza has spent decades at the intersection of healing, spirituality, and social justice, from pediatric oncology to LGBTQ plus health advocacy to running a nonprofit providing spiritual care for frontline activists. She knows a thing or two about burnout, but she also knows her way through it. In this conversation, we talk about what it actually means to live with purpose, not as a destination, but as a way of being. We talk about staying rooted when the world feels like it's unraveling, and the practice of going deep so we can show up fully, and why disconnecting is not actually the answer, even when you really want to. This conversation is just what we need in this moment. At least it was just what I needed. But I do need to say one thing about the audio. Dr. Liza has a soft voice and is not using a fancy podcast microphone. I did my best to level the sounds. I'm reminded of the phrase, speak softly but carry a big stick. Dr. Liza's big stick is definitely the power and the wisdom she's sharing in this conversation. So I really hope you hang through the audio fluctuations and enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Liza Rankow to the show today. Welcome. How are you?
I'm okay, Debbie. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here with you.
We've been chatting for a while before I hit record, so I hope we didn't use up all the magic. It was a very lovely exchange before I hit record, and we were both sharing how we're consummate introverts.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've hit record, let's see how well we continue that conversation. We usually start out with giving you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and what has brought you to the show today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that throughout most of my life, both personally and professionally, I've inhabited the intersection of healing, spirituality, and social justice. I'm a longtime activist, a spiritual teacher and counselor, an author, an educator. And in one of my past professional lives, I practiced medicine as a PA in pediatric oncology and was involved in some of the earlier days of the LGBTQ health movement, doing research and advocacy. As I think you know, for almost 20 years, I ran a community-based nonprofit, One Life Institute, that provided spiritual care for frontline activists. And most recently, of course, my focus has been on my newly released book, Soul Medicine for a Fractured World, Healing, Justice, and the Path of Wholeness.
That's quite a background.
Yeah.
Especially what we're experiencing currently in the world.
Yeah.
When did your book come out?
The official pub date was in late November.
Okay.
And as I was telling you before we started recording, it ended up being kind of a mushy release date where it was people were getting it from some sites like a month before that, and from other sites not until a month after that. And so I just had to surrender, all of the burden that we put on the release date as somehow being this magic day that has to push you to
Yeah, they
to the
talk
pinnacle,
about, yeah, you have to be pulling all the right levers and spinning all the right dials in the right sequence for that period of time. So
Yeah, I'm just not built for that kind of
I
focus.
the same, because I had a friend who is launching her podcast, and I'm watching the way she's doing it. I'm like, oh, that's all a great idea. And I remember people telling me that I should do that too. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
just can't do all the moving parts at the same time as you're living your life in the world that we're required to live our life in currently, right? We were talking a little bit about that before we hit record.
And I have to trust that, the same. I'm obviously a spiritually rooted person, and I have to trust that the same spirit that gave me the assignment and that helped write the book knows where it needs to go and who needs to find it for it to do its work in the world. So it's kind of a faith walk in that regard. Still got to do my part, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm less attached to, the industry best practices.
Right. Do you have, I mean, it's been a few months. Do you have an idea or a sense of who is finding the book?
Um, yes and no. I hear from people in my extended network who are reading it and who are just really moved and appreciative. Um, I've done a couple of interactive Zoom sessions with people I don't know. And then I hear about some circuitous pathways that folks that I have no idea how it came to them, but I'm grateful that it did. So it's, I think it's got its own momentum.
That's awesome.
Just try to be faithful to that.
And in full transparency, I know you sent me a little bit of the book, and I've been having eye issues, so haven't been doing a lot of actual reading. And now I'm kicking myself. I think I should have read a little bit more of it before we actually had this conversation. But now I'm excited. When I get my next eye procedure and I can read with a little more ease, I'm going to definitely check it out, because it sounds like something that could be very helpful in this particular moment in history.
It really is about the times that we're in, these times of social and political and ecological collapse, and how in the face of all that, it's so natural for us to feel overwhelmed, and to want to disconnect, to kind of push back the intensity of the pain. But answer, I think, is not to disconnect, but it's to connect more deeply, right? To root ourselves in something more powerful than the chaos, our belonging to what I call a sacred wholeness that breathes through all of life. So the book is kind of an invitation to remember and to live into that wholeness, but how we can live with purpose and meaning and contribute whatever is ours to this, multi-generational ongoing project of collective healing and transformation. There's a way that, I wrote it as part of my own search for meaning in these times, as, as a contribution that I hope will be helpful to others.
I'm curious, where are you finding meaning currently?
I think that each of us comes into this life with purpose. And I've always, like, that's always been kind of part of my spiritual worldview. But especially in these times, this is not a casual time to be alive on planet Earth. This is not like a vacation incarnation kind of a season. So, I have to trust that if somebody is here now, that there is something within us that chose to be here. This is a pivotal time. Like, we could either blow the whole thing up, or we can shift toward a more life-giving culture. And not to say there are not life-giving cultures, but the dominant destructive force in the world right now is our United Statesian capitalist colonial modernity. We have the biggest weapons and the biggest megaphone right now, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so as more and more people are waking up and making a different choice, right? So it's like, where are we looking? How do we find meaning? How did the people in Minneapolis find meaning? Right? Here's this horrific assault. And rather than doing what the attacking force expected, which is to cower at home and say, let me keep myself safe, this really doesn't concern me, they made the choice to infuse the meaning of belonging, the meaning of community and care as core values in a culture that says, oh, the most important value is my personal success and domination. So that to me is a powerful example of finding meaning in the face of the atrocity.
It's so huge. I'm getting goosebumps as you're talking. The people in Minneapolis are so inspirational. And the fact that they're doing it all in the face of the sub-zero degrees, right? They're not just battling the forces, but they're doing it while they're trying not to freeze.
There's people all over the world who are, like, we're aware of Minneapolis because we live here, and we know people in Minneapolis who are in the streets, right? But there's people in Palestine, right? There's people all over the world who are risking, or who have had their security stripped away from them by violence, but who are standing in dignity, in love, in community. And that, to me, is tremendously hopeful and inspiring.
It's a powerful vision to hold on to.
It is. It is. And how do each of us live into whatever our version of that is?
Yeah. And I love that you said that we all come into this world with purpose, but you didn't say a purpose. I feel like a lot of people get stuck on the, like, what is my purpose? Like, it's one singular thing.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts on that?
You can accomplish and check off, and like, I finished my purpose. Give me
check, done.
I talk about purpose more as the quality of being, rather than as a thing that we do, or a goal, or an objective. Who are we called to be, right? And to make the practice be living into that more fully. And then as we be who we are here to be, the doing arises from there. It's just a way to give legs to.
No, I'm going to cry hearing you say, like, yes, that's it. Like, and sometimes I'm thinking in the back of my brain, like, do I just have these podcasts to validate the things that I think? But it's not that I thought that we were going to have a conversation about this. But I've said for so long, it's about being. It's about, we are human beings. It's not like humans doing. It's not like what we're doing. It's like how we are being in the world with one another.
Right.
Is where we find a purpose, our purpose in that moment.
Is where we find meaning.
Yeah.
And I know you're all about like societal norms. Well, the societal norm tells us that our purpose is make a lot of money and
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of status, right? But that's not an authentic purpose.
Mm-mm.
Our authentic purpose is much deeper. And we have to go deep to find it. And the dominant culture does not encourage going deep.
Well, it doesn't encourage the slowing down and the taking the time. It might not even require deep as much as just awareness. Like, why am I checking all these boxes to accomplish this thing that society tells me, even though the checking of the boxes isn't something that it's really making me feel good, but I know it'll get me to that place that they, quote unquote, say I should want to be.
And what world is it creating?
Mm-hmm.
That's the other piece. You know, when we stay within those confines, even if we are quote unquote successful in it, we're successful at perpetuating a violent and abusive world. That's not the world that I want to live in, nor is it probably the world that most people. It's a minority of folks that are benefiting from this particular
And
contract.
it's just it has to change their brain in some capacity. Like when you get to a certain level of wealth, that it just doesn't make any sense because billionaires could contribute so much to the greater good for others and have zero impact on their way of life. And still, they don't. They'd rather hoard that wealth.
But why
It's
do we
bonkers.
why do we even have a world where there are billionaires?
I don't get it.
There's a fundamental question there about the structure that, that the dominant culture here and in the Western parts of the Western world has created. It's, that empire mentality. But there are other ways to be in relationship with one another.
And I feel like that's part of the game too, right? They don't give us enough time to consider those other ways. If we're so busy checking, on the conveyor belt, checking the boxes, doing the thing that they say we should be doing, of course we think that's the one only way, right?
And we have to be careful which we're talking about, because
Yeah.
there are
It's me and the mouse in my pocket.
cultures.
Oh yeah.
There's plenty of other cultures who, are making different choices, and there's some beautiful, creative, visionary reimagination that's going on now. It's just not on the news.
No, it's not. It's
So
not.
if we seek that stuff out, if we seek out some of the beauty, both the the traditional cultural values that have persisted throughout empire and apocalypse, and then also the new emergent that a lot of younger generation folks are doing, but some old dogs as well. Yeah, there's a lot happening below the surface. What we see on the news.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you calling me out on that, because it is a bit, we get super focused on, United States as the central, because we've been programmed that we are the best.
And the dominant, racial capitalist, white supremacist culture of the United States. Mm-hmm. Like even if we don't agree with it, there's a way that we define ourselves through it, mm-hmm. because that's what we're acculturated to.
And that's where I really think, I hope I'm helping people see the way that they are participating and propping it up with the norms that they are subscribing to in their everyday life. Because it needs us to function.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start opting out, which is what I feel like I see more and more people waking up to, like once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it. And I don't want to keep contributing to it. How do I disengage? How do I remove myself from the web? Because it's sticky and it's everywhere.
And that's why in the book, I talk about this larger wholeness. The dominant culture has such great publicity agents, but right? It seems like it's the big thing. And how can little me or little us make a dent in this huge thing, this machine, right? But if we expand our purview, right, both in terms of time and in terms of all of life, empire is actually pretty small. Even a couple thousand years is actually a pretty small amount of time in the history of humanity, even, but certainly in the history of this planet. And if we talk about the web of all life, instead of the sticky web of empire that we get tangled up in and consumed by, if we look at the web of all life, that's a different and much larger web. And something that that spirit nature kind of whispered to me when I was working on the book is that just like on a spider's web where you tap lightly anywhere on it, the vibrations travel throughout all of it, that we can impact the whole from wherever we are within it. And that none of us is alone in this, that, we actually are the majority. When we talk, and by this we, I mean the we that is in league with this larger life, the we that is in league with wholeness, right? That's a larger we. And that, to go back to like what inspires me, what gives me meaning, that's a big piece of it. And I have to do it it's like a regular practice because we're constantly being assaulted by the daily exploits of what I hope is a collapsing empire.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I feel like it's all a practice. Every day is a practice of waking up and how am I going to be a human today?
And how am I going to respond in this moment to this thing and in that moment to that?
You had mentioned earlier a shift away from this dominant destructive. What do you see us shifting to?
Well, I characterize, so if we look at all the demonstrations of violence and oppression and domination, at the root of them, I would suggest, is a worldview of separation and dualism. The opposition, us and them, right and wrong, in and out, belong and not. That ideology, that worldview, to me, without transforming that, whatever wins we may have at the level of systems and structures can't endure. We have recent historical evidence, right? How hard did folks in the freedom movement work to pass the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act? And then, that passed within my lifetime. And within my lifetime, it was completely undone right? By the whims of a wannabe fascist dictator president, by a regressive Supreme Court, like just undone like that, because the fundamental worldview was still stuck in this pattern. So when you say what shift, to me, it's that shift from a worldview of separation and dualism to a worldview of belonging and oneness. And that, I mean, Dr. King used to say, we have to labor for the transformation, knowing that it could take generations, or stay available to the idea it could happen in an instant. That's a gross paraphrase, but that was the gist of it. And so, I try to hold the both and of that. Like, this is a shift, and we think you say shift, and it seems like, oh, that's something we'll just do next week. We can just just make that little shift. But this is something that's been going on, for generations and generations, and likely will continue for generations. What is our part in our moment, right? During our brief time on the planet, what contribution can we make? And trust that just like we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, that can we be good shoulders for those who will come after? I was having just really deep despair one day and saying, like, I don't know how to fix this, just railing to the universe. I have no idea how to fix this. And Spirit said, just be shoulders, because I'm so aware and grateful of all that I stand on who came before me. And I thought, I know I could be good shoulders. I know how to do that. I don't know how to fix it, but I know how to be good shoulders. And I know a lot of brilliant young people.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So if I can do that, like, that would be a worthy contribution.
I like that you said that, because so often you hear people talking about the younger generations as pointing out all their faults. And I'm thinking, like, I see some kids who are just tired of this bullshit, and they're not going to take it, and they want to do things differently, and they're not afraid to speak up. They were just showing some kids, of course, being abused by, LAPD, because they were trying to protest. And I know in our tiny little community, our kids did a walkout in solidarity with the folks in Minneapolis. So yeah, young people give me hope. And I love that idea of being good shoulders.
Good shoulders. Intergenerationality is, the older I get, the more I appreciate it. I have been so blessed by my relationships with folks older than myself, many of whom, if not most of whom, are now ancestors. I still talk to them, but it's not the same as being able to just call them up on the phone and go sit together. And I am just so grateful for the younger folks in my life and for our relationship. And it is a mutuality. Each of us has gifts that benefit the other and that benefit the collective. So, yeah.
Showing up in whatever way we're called and being. Don't be so focused on the doing.
Well, the doing will come out of it's like where do you start, right? Start with going deep and listening. And then trust that what emerges from there will be of a different quality than if just our best thinking and our logic mind says, well, here are the steps. Let's just execute the steps. Was it Einstein that said you can't solve a problem from the same consciousness that created? So our best thinking is really still in that paradigm that created the problem.
Right.
There's something deep within us.
How do we give ourselves permission to think outside of that paradigm?
or to tune into something that was never contained in that paradigm to begin with.
Yeah.
When I say go deep, it's also a way to like you go deep and you expand outward. It doesn't, going deep is not a narrowing down. It's actually a widening.
Do you have any practices that help you do that?
All the time.
What are your favorites?
I have the book actually is full of practices woven throughout the book. Each chapter ends with reflection practices, but there's also an appendix with practices, and there's practices woven throughout, because, you know, if you can't embody it, then it's all just, you know, I love ideas, you know, there are a lot of ideas in there, but we also need that embodiment and that cultivation of something in ourselves. So for me, meditation, but deep listening, you know, which for some people is synonymous with meditation, and for others is a separate practice. At the heart of my spiritual life is nature. Like, I experience the divine most readily through nature. And, you know, lucky for me, nature is everywhere, including us. You know, we are part of nature. So, you know, I live in a city, but it's a city that has trees and, you know, backyards and bushes growing along the sidewalk, and there's always the sky and the sun and the earth beneath us, and we're mostly made of water, so the elements are always there. And every part of nature can be our teacher. It's intelligent. There's an arrogance that says human beings are the pinnacle of evolution and we're the only intelligent life forms in the whole universe. Like, what? How ridiculous is that idea? You know?
It is.
And so to through practice, to develop my ability to listen, you know, to be in relationship with this larger life, with the wholeness, with, you know, the trees are my amazing teachers. You know, but even like there's a squirrel that's been digging in my garden and just annoying the Jesus out of me. It's not the word I was going to use, but I don't know if you.
I don't know. We're open to that.
And it's so bold. You know, I was out there, I was trying to clap my hands and scare it away, and it just looked at me and started coming towards me, and I was like, oh, you know, and I'm like, okay. I just sat down and I said, okay, what? You
How
know,
are we
and
going to share this space?
we just had, you know, our little time, and I apologized, you know, not respecting that it belonged there too, and said, but can you not dig up my flower beds? Like, you know, help yourself to the seed pods or whatever it is, or, you know, whatever you planted last year you're trying to find, because it's digging up holes everywhere looking for what it lost, you know. And so it's such a different way to live, to be in relationship, to be in respectful listening.
Well, I feel like spending time in nature, it's easy to see how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
And the more we develop our relationship with nature, we realize, oh, we're a part of that too. I feel like when you're just casually spending time in nature, you feel apart from it. But with the more you spend in it and you realize that it is all connected, and I'm part of this, to use the analogy we used earlier, web.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we all going to get through this together?
And to have the humility to say that nature, the trees, the water, they've been here a lot longer than us humans. They probably have some wisdom to share with us right now.
Yeah, and if we don't figure things out, they're going to be what's left, and we'll be gone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, you have this rich background of activism work and rooted in collective care and healing. But I'm curious how you came to this, because it sounds like you've been doing it for a while, right? So how did you first come to this?
Debbie, it's funny because I had never really thought about it till I sat down and started writing, but I was this way when I was a little kid. I maybe, got seduced by the world somewhere along the way and had to find my way back to what she knew. But we think so much, we do our inner child healing work, and we're more focused on the trauma that we hold from our childhood. But there's more. No matter what traumas we've been through, there's more to us than that. And so, I was a deeply spiritual kid. Um, I felt spirit in nature. I grew up in New York City, but I felt the spirit in nature. Um, my parents, this was in the 60s. My dad was basically a Jewish atheist, and my mom had been raised Lutheran when they got married in the 50s. And they weren't really doing much of anything when I came along. But when I was in grade school, they became seekers, and they mostly through reading a lot of books. So I grew up in this climate of seeking and shelves of books. I read Paramahansa Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi the summer I turned 9.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then when I was in 5th grade, I got up before school and read the Gospels, to just intrigued by Jesus like I had been by Yogananda. I had a little notebook. I actually still have this little notebook where I would write, I titled it Messages of Truth. And I would write little profound sayings that just kind of came to me. And I think, who was that baby? And
Wow.
I also grew up during the US war in Vietnam. And my parents were not activists, but I was. I wore my black moratorium armband, and I learned the meaning of the word confiscate because my 3rd grade teacher confiscated all my peace buttons. And I had an underground newspaper in 3rd grade called The Dove. So I'm like, oh, what's this baby?
That is
I,
amazing.
yeah. So in a sense, all of these years of the journey, our lives are spirals. Our
Mhm.
lives are not straight lines. And so it's not a circle that's an exact return, but I think more of a spiral where it's an evolutionary return and an integration and embodiment and an evolution of what is truest within us. And so, you know, I,
I mean, because I have hints of this work that I'm doing currently in my childhood when I look back, oh yeah, I've kind of always been interested in that. And I was always a little like pushing the buttons and questioning,
yeah,
um, but not as obvious as an underground
yeah,
newspaper.
yeah.
And
And that's how I thought of it. Like, how did I even know what an underground newspaper was? But it was like, now we would call it a zine, but, there was no
uh,
such thing as a zine then. So an underground newspaper. And it was forbidden because it was confiscated by my 3rd grade teacher when she found it. Um, but then I also, had many years of not integrating, right? So when I was a kid, I had the spirituality and this social justice. And then I spent a lot of years either being a hardcore activist and, falling to the burnout as so many do, or, I would burn out and have a health crisis. And then I would have these long periods of deep spiritual healing work. And then I would be strong enough to go back out into the fray. And so I did this, back and forth thing. And it was like, why? Like, really? There's another
there's
way.
got to be a better way. Yeah.
And so I, gradually, through the abuse and recovery cycle in my own body, gradually found my way back to what little one knew, is that these are not separate.
Mm-hmm.
That spirituality and social justice are not separate, that inner transformation and social transformation are not separate. And of course, there's a whole universe of people who have known that
Mm-hmm.
for centuries and lived it and written about it and taught about it and embodied it. And so to intentionally study them, and that's was a good part of what my doctoral work was looking for who are the people that gave life to that integration, to that synergy.
And letting it become an embodiment for herself, understanding for myself, like I understood the concept. None of us are free until we're all free.
Mm.
I understood it on an intellectual level, but it wasn't until the recent years and the things that have been happening where it comes to your own community and you see your friends and your neighbors feeling truly afraid and recognizing like that, oh, that could happen to them. And how do I feel about that being, this is someone I care. So it just makes it so much more real. And then it's like, oh, that's it. Like now I understand it, not just here, but here. So not just in my head, but also in my heart. Like, no, none of us are free until we're all free.
And there's even another layer of it that, talk about an inconvenient truth. Archbishop Desmond Tutu talks about this. I don't know if you're familiar with Valerie Kaur. She's the founder of the Revolutionary
Mm-hmm.
Love Project, just a beautiful soul. But even our opponents, we're not free until they're free.
Yes.
Without the transformation of the oppressed, the dynamic of oppression can never be eliminated. We're used to thinking about liberation of the oppressed, which is absolutely first cause,
Mm-hmm.
but that there has to be also the liberation of the oppressor. And that's a much harder pill to swallow.
100%. But then you think like there's something that's caused them to feel the need to oppress people.
Exactly.
So what is that?
I spend a lot of time with that question. And what is it that helps people get free? So what is it that causes what to me is like a spiritual malady, to be able to behave with such cruelty? And then you hear the stories of people who like used to be in the Klan or used to be white supremacists or used to be MAGA, right? And now who are not, and are actually trying to go back and wake up their former comrades. What is the key to that awakening? And so often it is relationship and connection. But that, to me, especially as a white-bodied person, I feel like there's a certain responsibility that I have to work on that front, among others, but that there's a leverage, that we have through our belonging to each other as human beings. But I wrestle with that. But it feels central to the collective liberation and transformation.
Yeah, I have to say I've struggled with it a bit because I've been tempted to do the blocking and the like just tuning out.
Yeah.
But then how do we know if there is ever an opportunity to connect? We'll miss it. And
Mhm.
and for myself, we talked about purpose a little bit, and I've been trying to remind myself that purpose for me right now, and it sounds a little different from the ways I normally communicate, but I remind myself that I'm here to love other people.
Yes.
And how am I going to love those around me in this moment? And thinking of my friends who are MAGA, and I've cared about them for decades, and it's a weird, because you hear the things they're supporting, and I mean, I just have to believe that they're hearing a different story. And how do we help them hear a different story? Um, I'm not claiming to have any answers, but I struggle with the idea of like just cutting them off completely, or trying to remain open to like
Right.
there might be an opportunity that I can help them.
And I think curiosity can be our friend here, because people don't change just because you tell them a thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? For the longest time, my feeling was just like, I want nothing to do with any of that, and just, rage and revulsion. And now I'm so deeply saddened and also genuinely curious. I'm so siloed on the far left that I don't I don't have any friends that, that are in that camp. But I could imagine, and we'll see what the universe might present to me now that I'm able to imagine it, but to sit down with somebody and say, help me understand how you came to that conclusion. And even perhaps to develop enough rapport to say, with compassion, right? Not with judgment. Who hurt you?
Mm-hmm.
What what happened? Because I don't think that humans are natural without empathy and without conscience. I think that either that is a trauma response or a social conditioning, or
Mm-hmm.
both.
Both, a little bit of both.
The trauma makes you more vulnerable. Social condition.
I know I read that book that was written by Donald Trump's
Yeah, by
niece.
Mary.
Yeah.
By Mary, yeah.
I mean, and understanding more about his upbringing, it makes it, at least it was when I read the book, I was like, oh,
Sure.
that's very sad, little Donald. No wonder you're such a tyrant.
And it doesn't give a pass for the
No,
behavior in the present,
not at all.
right? Because the love demands that we halt behaviors of harm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can also do that with love for the perpetrator and say, yes, and you may no longer do this.
Mm-hmm.
It was the great anti-war activist Barbara Deming from back in the day who talked about the two hands of nonviolence, and that one hand is up to halt the violence, to say, stop this, you may not proceed with this. And the other hand is open to say, let us build relationship in a different way. And it may be generations before anybody takes that hand, but we keep it open.
Well, that's what I try to talk to people like, oh, we just got to get through these next few years. I was like, oh, no, we've got a lot longer to work through this.
And I see those two hands active in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
There's both the standing in the way of harm, saying you will not continue to snatch people up, you will not continue this. And we are here to welcome you to let go of those uniforms and that behavior.
Mm-hmm. I loved that one video that was going around of the group
Right.
singing in front of the hotel.
Yeah, in front of the hotel was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Show us your courage. You can make a different choice. Come join us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's plenty of people who met that with great cynicism, and understandably so. But each of us has a different role. That's the other piece about this. It's like there's not one prescription of what makes you a good activist or anything else, but that we need the whole spectrum of us. And that comes back to the going deep within to say, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
What are my gifts? What is my greatest contribution? And for some, it is, that hard no to oppression, to abuse, to assault, and just to fight hard against that. And for some, it's, walking the babies to school and bringing food. And for others, it is doing, I was going to say the conversion practice, this, in a way, but the invitation to step outside the conditioned role,
Mm-hmm.
and to step outside, to go back to what I was saying before of even this the ideology of domination.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of time. I've had such a great conversation. I mean, even before we hit record, we had such a great conversation. But I like to wrap up with a few questions to give some structure to my episodes.
Sure.
And some of this we may have touched on already, but it's a good summary. It's always nice to highlight things. So how are you taking care of yourself so you can remain engaged without burning out, like you had talked about earlier?
Right. And I think a lot of it is, is kind of woven into our conversation. But, for me, it is that both and, right? Is both. It is important to me to stay informed about what's going on. But I am conscious about how I do that. So, like, I'm not a doom scroller, because the toll that would take on me would make me unable to engage in, in the transformative callings of, of my purpose. But I do listen to Democracy Now! Every day. I don't watch it, I listen to it. I'll sometimes look at Al Jazeera. I read Heather Cox Richardson and some other things on Substack. But I also spend time with my hands in the dirt in my little backyard patch of earth. I have a prayer partner, and we, also for the last 30 years, we have been each other's main, I call it a spiritual jogging partner. So we talk through everything, and then we pray on it instead of stew on it. I have meditation and energy healing practices that I've been doing to help keep my body and my, subtle bodies, as aligned as I can, because I live with chronic disabling illness. So I have to, I have to rest the body. I have to drink water, but also to pay attention to the beauty. If our only intake is atrocity, we're not going to last. But if our only intake is the sweet stuff, then we're not really here and engaged. So the both and.
Well, and also if we're only paying attention to the sweet stuff, the other stuff is going to catch up to us eventually. So
Yeah.
just because we're ignoring it doesn't mean it's going away or solving itself. The next question is about how you're staying informed, but you've already touched on that. But I do want to highlight that you said you listen to Democracy Now! As opposed to watching it. And that is a really good point, because I also listen, but I've been toying with the idea of watching it in the evening instead of listening to it first thing. But I kind of.
And it's a titration, Debbie. You know, there I think for each of us, there are days when we can take in more and days when that would actually be counterproductive.
Yeah. And that goes back to me saying, like, I feel like every day is a practice of how am I going to be today? Because every day there's new things popping up and we are different people, right? You talked about chronic illness. I have an autoimmune issue. So it's also like, okay, how is my body feeling today? How much energy do I have to contribute? And how much resting do I need to do and drinking water?
And that is part of how we make sure that we stay able to contribute to the larger, right? We're not saying, oh, well, I can't do that. And so, peace out. Good luck, y'all. It's, I think of it like the in-breath and the out-breath. We need both. We need both. If we don't ever breathe in, we won't have anything to breathe out. But if we only breathe in, then there's,
we're going to be like Violet.
Where do you go? There's no circulation there.
I've got the visual of Violet from Willy Wonka when it's blueberry juice, but she blows up like a balloon. And so we've talked about the shift a little bit. We've talked about the dominant structures starting to crumble. What is your vision and hope for the future?
It is, to me, that world rooted in oneness, in belonging, in reverence for not only other human beings, but for the planet and for all of life. I don't have like a concrete vision of what the systems and structures of that world would be, but I want to do what I can to help midwife a world that is rooted in that soil. And I'm excited. I'll probably be watching from Ancestor World at that point. But, there are seedlings of it now. And so I think, the invitation is how do we, in my generation, how do I help nurture those seedlings? How do we hold space for the generations that are the primary tenders of those seedlings?
Yeah. Hold space for them and be the good shoulders that they need.
Yeah. And to live from that paradigm as much as I can now. Like, what does that demand? Right? Because we have to, it's not like we say, well, I'll start acting from oneness when the world changes.
When it gets here, right.
Like, it gets here through each of us, right? So what does that demand, moment to moment, choice to choice? How does that demand that I respond, to what's on the news and what's in the neighborhood?
Yes, that's it. That's what are the choices we're making every day, and how is that contributing to that vision we have? That's the challenge. And the agency, the opportunity.
Exactly. The invitation.
Because I can make choices that are easy and ingrained, but are definitely not going to take me in the direction of that vision. Well, is there anything you were hoping we would touch on that we haven't touched on yet?
No, we just went far and wide, didn't we?
We did a lot.
I would love to do just a little a little pitch and let people know that, if you want to learn more about my book, my website is my name, but because that's harder to spell and remember, you can get there through soulmedicinebook.com.
Oh,
And from there, you can find my Substack and my social media and all the things. Some practices, guided practices are on there. I try to add more things regularly, but if anybody felt resonant or curious about the things that I shared in our wonderful conversation, I hope that they'll maybe check out the book and find more.
yeah, definitely. I know I'm going to grab a copy,
Right.
and I will definitely share all those links in the show notes. So if listeners were to take just one thing from this conversation, what do you hope they're taking away with them?
That you have gifts and purpose that are needed in the world in this time.
I'm gonna cry. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank you, Debbie.
and your wisdom. I really appreciate what you've shared in the conversation we had today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your vision and the work that you do.
We'll get there someday, some generation.